2023 was another year that brought significant challenges across the globe with geopolitical tensions, and towards the end of the year, inflation started to ease, prompting a roller coaster in the financial markets as investors pinned hopes on interest rate cuts. 2024 will see elections in many large economies, including the US. Meanwhile, global growth is predicted to slow. Within this uncertain environment, Cellnex in 2023 delivered strong results and put into place a new leadership to strengthen the company's position as a leader in European telecom infrastructure. To talk about the year that was and what 2024 has in store for Cellnex, I'm joined by Anne Bouverot, Chair of Cellnex, and the Chief Executive Officer, Marco Patuano. It's been another busy year for Cellnex in 2023. You consolidated the new strategy that you launched at the end of 2022, and there's a renewed leadership team. Ms. Bouverot, can you maybe walk us through what you think are the highlights in 2023 for Cellnex?
Yes, with pleasure. Well, 2023 was a transformational year. It started at the end of 22 when the company announced its new industrial strategy, moving away from years of very successful M&A and wanting to consolidate on organic growth and reducing the cost of debt. But then 23 was, full of events. At the beginning of 23, the previous CEO announced that he was going to leave the company. In March of 23, the board appointed me as its new chair, in line with the new strategy because of my telecoms and former CEO and corporate governance experience. Then at the beginning of June, we held our annual general meeting. We appointed Marco Patuano as our new CEO. We're very pleased with his appointment. He brings a perfect mix of telecoms, investment, previous CEO experience on a global scale. We also took that opportunity to expand the size of the board, and I'm sure we'll come back to that in a moment. And since then, the company has been delivering on its objectives and on its business plan and on its new strategy.
And Mr. Patuano, you joined the company, as Ms. Bouverot said, halfway through the year. What were your priorities when you first arrived, and how did you go about pursuing them?
Yeah, the priorities are exactly what Anne said before. So we had to concentrate on organic growth, and we have to deliver the investment grade. So we needed to re-equilibrate our capital structure in order to have a bit less leverage. It's not dramatic, but we need to do it. And in order to do this, we had to change a little bit the approach of the company. This was a very corporate-centric company. Every time you do M&A, you do from the corporate, and now there is more balance between the center and the countries. So we're moving from a very corporate-centric to a more equilibrated situation between the center and the countries, and we are working a lot in order to give full support to the countries. And the last we had to make, and we pursued also with the help of the board, a broad portfolio review that could have been geographic, it could have been line of business, and in order to understand where we should extract more value, which drove us also to some interesting conclusion. There are some possibility of extracting value, partnering with others, which is what we did in the Nordics. So we welcomed a new investor, co-investor in Denmark and Sweden, where our objective is continue growing. So it's not going to be just an efficiency story, it's going to be a growth story as well.
And can you elaborate a little bit on where that organic growth is going to come from?
Well, organic growth, there are no magics in organic growth in our industry. So organic growth comes from, on one side, towers, building more towers. From the past, we have a contract that allow us to build more towers for our partners, which is important for them because they are continuing densifying their network, and important for us because it's a new revenue stream. And then we will take more profit of the existing portfolio of towers, so selling more, so more co-location, more objects on the tower, and this is one. The second is working on the active components. The active components can be small cell, it can be DAS, it can be in one country, in Poland, we have an entire RAN, which is an entire mobile network. And it's extremely interesting because I strongly believe that these can be the frontier for the future. And we have a third leg, which is, let me call it tower-like assets. So the business model is the same, but with a different asset, which is normally fiber. It's never fiber to the home. It's never fiber to the end customer. It's a wholesale fiber or some data center that is something that can give us further growth.
And part of that exercise of boosting cash flow is boosting organic growth, but also presumably savings and efficiencies. Where do you see further savings or efficiencies in Cellnex?
Sure. The efficiencies basically come from being more concentrated, making all the operations in a more process-oriented way. So we have to replicate the best practice along the group more consistently. The second area, possibly the most important saving area, is on the land property. Today, the cost number one for every tower company in the planet is the rental of the land or the rooftops on which the towers are built. We should buy more. We should invest more. So it's a capex-driven investment area, and more digitalization.
Thanks. That's very clear. Ms. Bouverot, you mentioned one of the key objectives was to reduce debt and attain investment grade by Standard & Poor's in 2024. Can you explain a bit why that's such an important milestone for the company and what impact it might have?
Yes, of course. Well, it's very simple. Reaching investment grade by a second rating agency is something that will allow us to continue to reduce the cost of our debt. And it's true that in an environment of higher inflation than what we used to have in the past, it's important that we have the cost of our debt under control and that we have a more resilient and flexible capital structure. So as Marco said, it's not that it was out of control. We have most of our debt that is at fixed rate, and we don't have anything that we have to renegotiate before 2026. However, it is important that we have that we reduce this cost of debt as much as possible, and that we are prepared to evolve in an environment where inflation is higher than it used to be in the past.
And as that debt comes down, cash generation will increase in the next few years. So my question is, how does the board think about capital allocation and shareholder distributions?
So yes, in line with the delivery of our business plan, the company is starting to generate cash, and it will become a sustainable and significant cash generation in the years to come. And therefore, we have a responsibility from the perspective of the company and the board to allocate those cash flows in the best way possible. And we need to do this taking into account, of course, our need to reduce our debt. So some of the cash will go there. We also need to make sure we can continue to invest in the areas where it makes sense. As Marco explained, for example, to get more efficiencies or also to support our customers or to strengthen our positions. And very importantly, we need to allocate some of that cash generation to shareholder remuneration. And we are planning to do this. We're planning to evolve our dividend policy to something that will be more meaningful. And we're also preparing for potential opportunistic decisions in terms of things like share buyback or extraordinary dividends, depending on how the company cash flow generation evolves.
Maybe we can step away from the numbers a bit and just talk about the sector, the largest sector, and what's happening there. Mr. Patuano, you have a lot of experience in the telecom sector, many years, and it's a sector where the operators are investing billions of euros in next generation networks. And facing quite a lot of challenges, I think, and there's a lot of mergers that have been announced that are in the process of getting approvals. What impact will this consolidation have on of your customers on Cellnex's business?
Well, I think that consolidation is mandatory in Europe. If you consider that we have less than the double of the population of the US, in the US there are 3 operators, here there are some hundreds, so it's unsustainable. And this turns into lower cash flow that can be allocated on investment, and this is something that is not sustainable in the long run. So I think that some kind of convergency can be more consolidation, or can be network consolidation should happen. And we are totally supportive on this. So the tower sector has been crucial and has been very supportive since the very beginning, because if you go back with the memory at the beginning of our sector, so we made available cash that was trapped into relatively unproductive, if you look with the MNO glasses, it was a relatively unproductive capital, and we made available capital to be invested in networks. So we have been crucial at the beginning of our history, and now we can be crucial also in the moment of the consolidation. Why? Because we are neutral, and so we can give comfort to the authorities that even in a scenario where there is a consolidation among networks or among players, the access to the passive infrastructure remains equal. So it remains arm's length. So everybody can have the same access, and this is extremely important. So we are strongly supportive, and we are sure that we can play an important role in this.
Do you think the sector is strategic, as Mr. Patuano was saying? What are your views?
Very much so. I think telecom services are strategic for Europe. I'd even speak about technological sovereignty. I think this is that level of importance. Telecoms are critical for citizens, for workers, for companies, and for the economy. And it is a sector that requires a lot of investment to keep on par with the development of new businesses and the economy. That investment is mostly made initially by telecoms operators, and Cellnex, we actually enable that. We help them make this investment, in particular in 5G, but also to some extent in fiber. So the role of Cellnex from that perspective is absolutely key. There's an additional reason why I think it's key to be a neutral operator, as Marco was saying. It's sustainability. Because of course, even if we put aside the financial investment, it doesn't make sense to have multiple duplicate networks in parallel physically on the ground in Europe to deliver services that can be delivered on less networks. And this is where Cellnex's role as a neutral, independent player supporting the development of these services is key and will continue to be key in the future.
In terms of 5G that you mentioned, that you both mentioned, where do you think we are in Europe in terms of 5G rollout? There's many people that are saying that we're behind relative to other regions like North America or Asia. What's your view on that?
Those people are right, unfortunately.
Yes.
This is something unprecedented for Europe. Europe has always been the house of that mobile telecommunications. And so we both remember from the 2G, 3G, 4G, it was always Europe opening new frontiers for the mobile world. I think that the fragmentation we were mentioning before prevented the availability of enough cash flows, not only to properly remunerate the investors, but most importantly, to invest. It's not something dramatic because for the time being, the breakthrough application that make 5G absolutely necessary, honestly, is not
There's no killer app.
It's not clear. So we have time to recover, but this does not mean that we can wait forever. So we need to recover. Today, vis-a-vis US and Asia, we are behind. But we can and we must recover quickly.
And maybe we can talk a bit about consolidation, not in the wider telecom sector, but in the tower sector, which has seen a lot of large-scale M&A in recent years. It's been fairly quiet in the last year or so. When do you think that large-scale M&A will return to the tower sector, and what role do you think Cellnex will play?
I think that short term, I would say that large scale are not in the radar screen. I think that there will be small scale, sort of in-market adjustments. There are still a significant number of towers that are not optimally not really located, not co-located. It's I think that we can do, and I told you at the beginning, in the Nordics we can do more consolidation, but eventually even in Spain there is a room for consolidation. So this is what can happen short term, because for large deals which are necessary, I think that if you look at Europe, there are so many tower operators. Again, look at the US. Now, US have 3 MNO and 3 tower operators. Here we have plenty also of tower operators. There will be something, but you need a better equity capital market and a better debt capital market that can support this opportunity. Medium term, I see as something very concrete. So 3-4 years from now, next couple of years, it will be something more and more local.
That's very clear. Thanks. And speaking of markets, maybe we can turn to the macro environment, which of course has a big impact on interest rates and equity valuations. And 2023 brought a lot of challenges there with geopolitical tensions and high inflation, but economies were more resilient than expected. And now we've started 2024 with slightly lower inflation but expectations of a global slowdown in growth. So I know it's difficult to have a crystal ball, but what are your views, or what are you expecting in 2024 in terms of the macro environment?
Yes, well, it's true that 23 has been challenging from the geopolitical perspective. In 22, we had the start and the shock of the war in Ukraine, and unfortunately, it is still unfolding.
Right.
In 23, we had the horrible events in Israel and in Gaza. And I do not hold a crystal ball, but I think we can certainly say that we cannot predict the future from a geopolitical perspective. It is true that this has had a strong impact on inflation, and that economies have sustained maybe better than what some people thought. We're now entering a year where the framework around interest rates is maybe more predictable. It has improved since some of what we saw in 2023. It's still higher than what we had before. And from that perspective, it's very important for us at Cellnex to make sure we have a prudent and flexible way to look at both our debt and the cost of debt, and also our capital allocation. So we're continuing in that way too, and we will be able to navigate 2024 on the basis of what we have already put in place.
Maybe we could return to something you mentioned at the beginning of the interview, which was that of the changes in Cellnex's board, which big changes. You became chair in March, and Mr. Patuano joined in June. But the board expanded to 13 members, and you have a new capital allocation committee. Can you give us just a little bit more color or context on these moves?
Yes, well, with pleasure. First of all, Cellnex, like every company, is subject to increased oversight in terms of both financial and non-financial matters. And we also every year think about how best to do our job at the board and be best organized. Back at the annual shareholder meeting at the beginning of June last year, we decided to slightly increase the size of the board within our existing board regulations to 13 members. And in line with the new strategy around industrial operational focus, we wanted to increase the skills at the board with operational CEO, strong corporate governance experience. And we feel we now have, and sustainability, we now have a very good set of skills at the board. We also have been thinking about the committees. We have the traditional board committees of audit and risk management on the one hand, and nominations, remunerations, and sustainability on the other hand. And we decided to create a third committee, the Capital Allocation Committee, exactly in line with what we discussed before, to be able to carefully review and analyze the decisions to be made to allocate cash flows between debt reduction, shareholder remuneration, and investment in supporting customers or other important industrial investment.
You mentioned sustainability before, and I'd like to ask actually both of you, what role does sustainability play at Cellnex? Cellnex is regularly recognized for its ESG credentials, but can you talk a bit more about the role it plays in strategy?
Yeah, I'm happy to start, and then I can give the board perspective, and then of course it's the company and the CEO that implements. So Marco will continue from the perspective of the board. We have been taking sustainability and ESG in general, environment, sustainability, governance, very seriously. We have an existing plan, an ESG plan, that currently runs to 2025, and we review it every year. We have a training program for board members that we also renew every year. Board members confirm their commitment to sustainability on an annual basis as well. And we're very proud that we have, for example, recently been included in the Dow Jones Sustainability Index for Europe. But more than indices, what is important is our KPIs and what we really do. And Marco, you'll be able to explain that very well.
Yeah, thank you. Well, we are a pan-European company. So we are deeply part of the pan-European debate around ESG. That, please allow me to be provocative for a millisecond. It seems to me a little bit a weird debate, because we are talking about if the cost of the ESG is something that is creating a competitive disadvantage of Europe vis-a-vis other regions of the planet.
Because there's a lot of emphasis on ESG, or?
Yes, because there is a decent emphasis. So I'm strongly convinced that we have not so much time in front of us. We have to act. It's time to act. And Europe, it's in the culture of Europe. It's in the culture of the European society to be a front runner on these mega issues. It's a planetary issue. It's not a European issue, but someone has to be the front runner, and it's our culture to be the front runner. So we, as a company, we are making a very important shift. So we were used to consider what are the ESG impact of our strategy, which is a good way to look at the existing, but it's a poor way to plan the future. So you have to take your ESG, not consequences, but your ESG goals, and to put inside your strategy. So your strategy is not only an industrial strategy, it's not only a financial strategy, it's a full, complete, sustainable strategy. Anne was talking about sustainability. So what is sustainability? I want to be sustainable for the next 100 years or more. So we need to have a planet for being here for the next 100 years. So it has to be embedded into our strategy. And this is the big change that we're going to do, which does not change a millimeter of our commitment towards all what we can do in terms of impact, environmental impact, social impact. We can have a tremendous social impact. Anne was talking about the importance and how strategic our digital infrastructure. We can have really an incredible social impact and good governance.
So it's an important part of the strategy.
It is.
Maybe we can just end a bit on the fact that you both have these new roles in the past year. Mr. Patuano, you've been in the role in the hot seat for a few months now. What surprised you the most since joining Cellnex?
Well, somehow I have to say that for me is also coming back, because I've been here a time ago.
Right.
So I knew that it was a good company, and so it was easy for me to accept the proposal of the board to join back the company. What surprised me is the incredible quantity of opportunities we have. We have business opportunities, we have ESG opportunities. There are an incredible quantity of opportunities that we have to make real. So it's not only, so we are never going to play defense. So if someone thinks that the new strategy is a defensive strategy, it cannot be more wrong. We are never going to be defensive. We are protagonists, and we will stay protagonists.
That's clear. Ms. Bouverot, you were on the board actually before you became chair in March. And so, how's your experience been since you became chair?
Well, first of all, when you become chair, it's a different role. So the very first thing I did was to reach out and speak with a significant number of our shareholders, of our customers, employees, other stakeholders, to listen and to see whether they were aligned with the strategy that we had announced at the end of 2022. It was very encouraging and positive to see that, yes, there was, and I believe there still is, a very strong alignment on the fact that this is the right strategy now for Cellnex. And so that was the very first thing, probably. And then, of course, our first responsibility for the board that I started to chair was to appoint a new CEO. We selected Marco as our new CEO on the basis of his prior experience and after a search that involved a number of other candidates, but he was the best. We're very pleased to have appointed him. And now we have a board that functions well, is united, is fully in support of Marco as CEO, and therefore I believe that we are now very well placed for Cellnex to continue to deliver on its goals in 2024 and beyond.
Well, thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to be here today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.